The yellow light is turned on at 6 minutes, and the red light is turned on at 7 and remains on until the end of the speech. Evaluations are usually 3 minutes. The green light is turned on at 2 minutes, the yellow light at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and the red light turns on at 3 and remains on until the end of the evaluation. And I'll be giving a report later tonight.
Our grammarian, Dan Craig. My role as the grammarian is to listen to the language that's used by everyone who speaks tonight and to make note of any exceptionally good language or perhaps some sort of language which is used which might be a little incorrect and should be improved. I'm also going to listen for the use of the word of the day. And tonight's word is replete. It means fully or abundantly provided for or filled. The second definition is abundantly fed, which ties into our theme tonight. The country's history, wow, I really messed it up. The country that's R-Y''s history is replete with stories of people who became successful by working hard. Replete. Use it. You'll be better for it. Our counter, Rhonda Whitaker.
Thank you. I will be listening for filler words, nervous words people say when they're not quite sure what to say next, like like, you know, so, but, and, tongue clicks, repeats, repeat, Xerox starts, or false starts. I will give my report at the end of the evening. Thank you.
The other role players who we'll hear from later are the general evaluator, Louis Denbaum, the joke master, Jeff Shipley, and the ballot counter, Annette Estes. And before we start table topics, I'd like to read the theme of tonight's meeting and to give a quote. The theme is international, ethnic, and local cuisine. The quote is, "Taste is developed by the diversity of the products one can sample." I think our children today may be missing an education about food. We must teach them to know their cuisine and to know the equilibrium of nourishment. This is very important for health. And now to start off our table topics, I'd like to call on our table topics master for tonight, Rhea Sain.
As Table Topics Master, I'll be inviting members who don't already enroll to come up and speak for 1 to 2 minutes. I've got a series of 7 questions, and I'll ask you to choose one of those numbers. So do I have a volunteer? Yeah. Art. So 1 to 7.
1.
What has been your most awkward or embarrassing dining out or home entertaining experience?
Good evening, Toastmasters, guests, viewers at home. The subject of awkward dining experiences is rich. The one that comes immediately to my mind was on the Seattle waterfront, wharves and fancy restaurants down at the waterfront in Seattle. I went to this Polynesian restaurant. I took my girlfriend at the time. I was in 11th or 12th grade for the fanciest meal that I could persuade her to go eat. She was very comfortable ordering a hamburger in a ritzy restaurant, and I just had put my foot down and said, no, we're going to do something exotic. So we ordered food, and I don't recall exactly what I ordered, but midway through the meal, I began to feel as if someone had taken a clamp and placed it on my temples and started pressing in on my head. And I began feeling like I'd been doing sit-ups for 2 or 3 hours. My stomach muscles seemed to be so fatigued. And I just ignored this experience for a while. And then I excused myself and I went to the men's room, and there happened to be a sort of a bench in there where you could sit, and I sat for a while and I laid down. I was wondering, what in tarnation is happening to me? This is just bizarre. Find out a few Chinese restaurants later, this was Chinese restaurant syndrome, and I had it big time, this particular fancy date with Carol. I recovered in about 20 minutes and went back and finished the meal, not still having any idea what had happened to me. It was only years later, after having repeat experiences in less severe form, that I actually got, this is what people are talking about with Chinese restaurant syndrome. Do not recommend it.
Another volunteer? You'll buy yourself. Number between 2 and 7.
7.
7. How do you function in a kitchen? For example, some people are very creative and they just throw together a bunch of things. Some people like to follow a recipe very exactly. And some people just open a counter and package. Heat it up. Describe to us how you function in a kitchen.
Hello everyone, my name is Gilberto and I want to talk about my kitchen experiences. I started out with the first, I think the first topic was just throw stuff in the pan and just cook. So that's how I started cooking. It took me a couple of years to actually master a little bit of more cooking. But my style is actually opening the fridge and seeing what I have, and then cooking. So I have broccoli and I have onions, or I have some fish. So I think about what I want to actually make. So I'm pretty creative when I cook. I followed maybe 3 recipes my entire cooking career. So, but I'm mostly cooking, and I have a replete. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong to use actually. I want to use that word, but talk about something else anyway. But yes, it's my story or my history of cooking is replete with a lot of recipes, my own recipes. So I look at what I have in the fridge and then make up what I actually want to eat at night, and then save for later. And then I go to the farmer's market also, and then I have an idea of what I want to cook the next couple of weeks. So that's my cooking kitchen experience, yes.
Next volunteer. Let's not all raise our hands at once. Rhonda. 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. 3. What is your favorite ethnic food? For example, favorite foods that you grew up with or that you adapted later in life?
My favorite ethnic food. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and viewers at home, fellow Toastmasters, my favorite ethnic food is smelt. It's something that people in Maine catch in the brooks. It's a little black fish about this long, and it's caught at night in nets. It's brought home and the fish are cleaned, the heads are chopped off and gutted, and then they bake them in butter after they're rolled in cornmeal, or in bacon fat. That was my favorite thing to eat, especially because I got to go and help catch them at night. We were too little to use the net, but we would get the flashlight and we'd look down off the bridge edge into the bottom and see the big suckers and the catfish that were hiding among the rocks. And it made the meal taste so much better when we had seen where it came from, we saw the life of the animals, and we saw our parents fix the meal. And everybody was very excited to have the fresh fish. They're very tasty and they're a delicacy in Maine. This makes me hungry for some right now. I'm not sure they still run in the brooks of Maine. They may be in the backwoods. Maine is still quite pristine in some areas. I wouldn't want to eat a fish from the streams in Iowa. That is my favorite ethnic meal, New England smelt.
Next volunteer?
Great.
Number 4.
If you were stranded on a deserted island, what would you do for food? And what if friendly natives offered you things like worms and grubs? Would you eat them?
Madam Table Topics Master, fellow Toastmasters, if I were stranded on a desert island, I don't think I would eat worms and grubs. What I would do was, through the miracle of modern communications, order Indian takeout. And Indian food is one of my favorite foods. My best experience with Indian food, my wife Sharon and I went to an Indian restaurant in New York City. And we liked Indian food, so we ordered it extra spicy. The owner brought the food, and we started to eat it. And it was so hot, it was so spicy, we couldn't even taste it. And there were both of us sitting there with tears rolling down our face, sweat pouring off our head. And the owner comes by and asks, "How's the food?" What could we say? And my wife, who is the most polite person in the world, said, and she could barely talk, "Oh, it's good." The owner was so touched that he made special dishes for us, extra hot, on the house. He brought it to the table. And not only did we have to eat the original spicy food, to be polite, we had to eat this incendiary food. After that, I'm surprised we had any taste buds left at all. And at the time, I probably wish we had eaten bugs and worms.
Gene, I think I saw your hand up earlier. 2, 5, or 6? 2. What is your opinion of our food supply as far as use of pesticides, herbicides in farming, chemicals added to processed and packaged food, and the genetic modification of our grains and vegetables?
Well, thank you, Madam Table Topics Master, fellow Toastmasters, guests, and viewers at home. I'm going to just step right in it. I'd love to talk about hot incendiary Indian food, but I am known for the person who says, do not dodge the question that you are pitched. So I'm going to talk a little bit just about confined animal feeding operations, which is very strong here in Iowa. I am not a vegetarian. I would eat pork, I would eat other sources of protein. However, where I have feelings is about animal welfare. I have friends that are in hog production, which makes a very interesting conversation. I'm going to not talk about additives, but I am going to talk about just the food supply and the effect that the CAFOs have on just, I think, diminishing our overall vitality and experience of our foods. I go by a confined animal feeding operation. You can always tell when you're going by one, not even if you don't know that it's there because of the odor. I just feel really touched by animals, not just hogs either. It's cows and chickens and all the animals that are living in conditions that you wouldn't want to wish on your worst enemy. I don't mind that they are part of the food chain, but what I do mind is that, or what I would like to see happen would be to have dignified life prior to becoming part of the food chain. And I think that would really help uplift our just our role as species on the planet, being responsible for other fellow species as well. A little somber, but that's my response to your question. That's it.
Do we have
No,
time?
that's it.
Okay, so we will vote for our favorite
Yeah, ask the timer who
qualified.
Yes, everyone qualified. That includes Art, Roberto, Rhonda, Rick, and G.
Welcome back. I'd like to introduce our table topics evaluator, Will Burns.
Thank you, Rick. Well, we had many speakers here, replete with wonderful stories, exciting narratives of food in all its forms. Starting off here, Art. I like how you, first off, all of our speakers tonight greeted the audience, which is a good thing to do, to acknowledge people here involved. Art, I liked your use of gestures up here when you were speaking, on your head when it was hurting, or on your stomach. What I would have liked is to actually seen you move more around the stage. You know, maybe you have to get up to go, you know, to this restroom, so you kind of have to shuffle, or however it was that you got there, just to create more of a. But again, I liked the story there. Gilberto, I like the description of what you cooked and kind of how you're doing it. Kind of okay, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take the broccoli, and I'm going to put together with this. What I would recommend for you is to just take advantage of the 30 seconds, because there was two periods. There was one when you were thinking about the ingredients, and also when you were trying to get replete in there.
Okay.
And if you take the 30 seconds that you are allotted at the start, you can kind of think about how you want to kind of get it structured, and that might have tightened it up a little bit, but otherwise it was great. Set up. Rhonda, I like how you moved around with the flashlight. The only thing I can recommend for you is to just maybe a little more vocal variety, which is sort of similar. But let's keep it up. Rick, I liked your the way you segued into talking about worms and grubs into Indian food. That was so well done. In fact, that if I was a judge, I don't even know if I would kind of penalize you for that in the competition, because it was way you did it. But for you, I recommend if you could move more deliberately, and I only really noticed this because I was behind the camera, having to kind of track you. And you move around the stage, which is good, but just a little more deliberation. I'm over here, I'm over here. But again, good job, keep it up, and I like your smooth, powerful close there, tying it all back together, back to the gross. Gene, you gave us a very thoughtful, nuanced response to this question. So for you, I would just recommend the same thing as Gilberto, that you maybe take 30 seconds, because I feel like there's a lot of meat there to what you were saying. To pack into,
You gotta pack them all the way in.
no pun intended. That's the way I think. I'm also not a vegetarian, as you probably tell. But just to kind of tighten it up, because there was a lot of really good content there. And that's what I have for you guys. Keep it up.
Thank you, Will. Now on to the prepared speeches section of tonight's meeting. And to introduce our first speaker, Jeff Shipley, I'd like to introduce Gene Symington-Craig.
I don't know what's. Thank you. Tonight, Jeff is going to be giving project number 9 from the Confident Communicator Manual, Persuade with Power. His objectives are to persuade listeners to adopt his viewpoint or ideas, or to take some kind of action. He is also to appeal to the audience's interests. He's to use logic and emotion to support his position, and to avoid using notes. I think he might want us to pretend that we are all Governor of Iowa, Terry Branstad. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we're Terry Branstad. Jeff Shipley is currently the Republican nominee, makes it a little more interesting, for Iowa House District 82, which includes all of Fairfield and most of Jefferson County, in addition to Van Buren and Davis counties. Jeff, through his political involvement and activism, has earned a reputation of someone who is not afraid to confront issues head-on and is willing to speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth may be. Toastmasters can help with that kind of activity. Jeff wishes to be an outspoken advocate of our community's values in Des Moines and yearns to harmonize the treacherous and divisive field of politics with honest, sincere, and authentic communication. Again, I think he's in the right place. Jeff's speech tonight isn't meant to persuade you as Toastmasters, but his main objective of persuasion is the Governor of Iowa, Terry Branstad. Please help me warmly welcome Jeff Shipley.
Fellow Toastmasters, honored distinguished guests, fellow Iowans watching at home, and hopefully I have the attention of our Honorable Governor Terry Branstad. The purpose of my speech tonight is to speak about a man named Benton McKenzie. Has anyone heard of him? Okay. So I'll be speaking about Benton McKenzie, and I'll be making some statements. I've never met this man. My statements and premises are largely based on media reports, specifically from the Quad City Times. And the purpose of the speech is to convince Terry Branstad that this man is not a criminal, that in fact I would consider him to be admired for his tenacity, and that he is deserving of a full pardon and exoneration of his criminal charges. So I'm going to start with the background and what's actually going on, and I want to present 3 arguments, if I have time: a moral argument, an economic argument, and a political argument, to convince the state of Terry Branstad, or Barack Obama for that matter, that this man is not a criminal and deserves love and compassion from society. So first thing, Mr. McKenzie is a resident of Scott County near Davenport in he was never, most of his adult life, he struggled from health issues. He was never really a healthful person, was always being treated from one condition to the next. In 2010, late 2010, he found a lump on his hip that was very suspicious. Several medical examinations later, it was diagnosed with angiosarcoma, which is a very aggressive cancer of the blood vessels and the cell lining. And so now he has these lesions and these lumps all over his body. He's in extreme discomfort pretty much every moment of every day due to this very aggressive cancer. It was around this time in 2011 that he decided to take his healthcare into his own hands. That he didn't want to be dependent on the existing medical establishment, that in his experience the medical establishment treats symptoms rather than diseases. It doesn't provide holistic treatment of individuals, and oftentimes it's prohibitively expensive. So what Mr. McKenzie did, through research of his own, he decided to harvest and cultivate a certain plant matter which he would blend up in juice to drink internally or to process into an oil in an ointment which he would apply externally onto his lesions and sores. And he claimed from his experience that this gave him relief for his excruciating medical condition. Unfortunately, the plant that he was cultivating is known as cannabis, oftentimes referred to as marijuana, and is prohibitively and punishable by extensive criminal punishment crimes in most of the United States of America, especially Iowa. So, Mr. Governor, I'm here to beg you and beseech you that you should use your executive power to pardon this man and exonerate him of criminal activity. So the first argument is a moral argument. This man was treating himself. In a crime, one of the big questions is who is the victim? Who was really impacted? Who is harmed by Mr. McKenzie's actions? I can't think of anyone who was harmed. He was in his privacy of his own home. He was treating himself. He wasn't, say, using this substance recreationally or doing anything dangerous or anyway externalizing his medicine to affect someone else. He was very private, confined within his own home. I don't think he was hurting anybody. Yet conversely, who was harmed by the criminal prosecution of him? Certainly Mr. McKenzie, who was rushed out of court to the emergency room, complaining of excruciating pain. Certainly his parents, who were also charged of related criminal charges, and his wife and his kid, they were harmed by the criminal prosecution. Who was harmed by the so-called crime? I don't think anyone. So what is more important, the letter of the law or the spirit of the law? Because I think if we were talking about a crime, I think there should be a victim. And if there isn't a victim, then it's immoral to prosecute him criminally. So based on that moral argument, I think he's deserving of a pardon. The second thing, Mr. Governor, I'd like you to consider is the economics. Criminal prosecution is very, very expensive. From the sheriff's rounding him up and seizing his property, to the courthouse, the magistrate, the judge with his six-figure salary presiding over the court, to the jail and the people who you want to lock him in this jailhouse until he dies. That's very expensive to the taxpayer. These are resources that could be going elsewhere, but due to the existing circumstances, I think are being misallocated. How much other good uses could we use of these economic resources? How much other benefit could we provide to Iowans if we just let it go? If we didn't devote these resources to prosecuting Mr. McKenzie? So I think there's a compelling economic argument that this is a waste of money, Mr. Governor, and that as a good steward, a so-called fiscal conservative such as yourself, you should respect the taxpayers of Iowa and pardon this man. The third argument is a political argument. Governor Branstad, you just signed a bill this legislative session recognizing that cannabis, or as you would call it marijuana, has medicinal application. You signed a bill which allows patients of intractable epilepsy to provide CBD oil, the oil that he was applying externally. If you have intractable epilepsy, you can possess that in Iowa. You have to break the law and bring it back from another state, but you're allowed to possess it. You signed this bill into law. Unfortunately, it's still a bill that needs a lot of improvement. The fact that there was no friendly amendments to this bill is one of the reasons I'm running for office. So you already signed this bill acknowledging that there is medical efficacy to these substances. So what's the difference between intractable epilepsy and angiosarcoma? Is it really that big of a leap? And again, luckily, Mr. McKenzie was just recently allowed to go to Oregon, a 5-hour flight, which he describes as torture, that Oregon will allow him the medicine that he wants, that he needs. So why can't Iowa? Why can't Iowa adopt the same policies Oregon and several other states in the United States and allow it? And again, I know you're running for re-election right now, Mr. Governor, but from my perspective as a voter and someone who speaks to voters regularly, I think we need some consistency. Republicans and conservatives, for the last 2 years have been talking about getting the government out of health care. Well, right now the government is very much involved in health care and is preventing this man access to medication. And he's suffering because of it. So I think, even with your commanding lead in the polls, that if you were to pose as a benevolent governor and extend your mercy onto this suffering patient, that there would be a political benefit to you, and that merely Iowa would be mimicking other successful programs in other states. So I think that's a political argument that it would be to your political benefit to pardon this man and grant him mercy. So, Mr. Governor, I really appreciate the time speaking with me today, and I hope you consider my moral, economic, and political arguments in pardoning this man, because I don't want to live in an Iowa where we turn our back on people who are suffering.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to take 2 minutes to evaluate Jeff's speech. Welcome back. I'd like to introduce Art Atkinson, who has given an introduction to Jolene Gates' speech.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening again, Toastmasters, guests, and viewers at home. Tonight we have the privilege of hearing from Jolene Gates, giving what is known at Toastmasters as her icebreaker speech. Jolene has not given a prepared speech before this club before, and she is launching her career tonight. Jolene claims that she's never had a career per se. She's worked as a seamstress for Neiman Marcus, as a securities clerk, as a bonded courier, and in the 70s, out of curiosity, she took a short class in the art of stained glass, which has now served her very well. She spent a number of years as a full-time mother and homemaker in Texas before moving to Fairfield in 2000, and at that time began working full-time as a stained glass artist. Now, she has her own studio in her home. Her other activities include choral singing, international folk dance, West African drumming. In addition to these solitary pursuits of reading and needlework, she takes care of 3 cats and a 130-pound Great Pyrenees dog in her country home. A short little aside that not many of us know about Jolene is that when her family was moving here from Texas, her husband was the advanced scout to come to Fairfield and scope out the scene and find living quarters, and stayed with my family for a period of time. And she claims that I was the first person in Fairfield that she met when she finally arrived, having packed up the house and brought her daughter. Tonight's talk is entitled One Memorable Summer. Please welcome Jolene Gates.
Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, viewers at home. I was told that my first speech should be about me. And I've always considered my life to have been fairly drab. Not a lot to write about, not a lot to talk about. So I started preparing my speech by compiling a list of words that describe me. And the list went something like this: Texan, dancer, mother, divorcee, atheist, Trekkie, cat lady, and so on. Of course, I can't go into a full biography tonight, but this list has sort of given you a hint of things about me that you might get to know later on. I can start with the oldest item on the list, I'm a Texan. I was born in Houston, I grew up in Dallas. More recently, I lived on a little farm outside a little town called Bahia, which is about half the size of Fairfield. And if I don't quite sound like a Texan, it's because, at least indirectly, because I studied acting in college. And in 4 years of studying acting in Texas, with other Texans studying acting, it's remarkable to me that no one ever suggested that it might be wise and practical to cultivate a more generic manner of speech. So it was a task I set myself, more or less successfully. But if I can have one conversation with a Texan, or just talk about Texas, it brings out the drawl. Y'all. My first experience with the larger world outside Texas came when I was a teenager. And on Christmas morning, the year I turned 14, my sisters and I rushed to the Christmas tree and saw, ranged around it like so many dominoes, 8 brand new large suitcases, each one a different color. My parents announced that in the following summer, we would be touring Europe for 12 weeks, and we would each have our own suitcase. Well, this announcement was predictably followed by scuffles and arguments, bag grabs, and I didn't move fast enough or yell loud enough to get the blue or the green bag. My bag was hot pink. This is the luggage tag from my so you can see the color of it. Now in the mod 60s, hot pink was pretty cool, but I just didn't like it. Never liked that suitcase. But I hefted that hot pink bag all over Europe in the summer of 1965. We toured in a blue Volkswagen minibus, my parents, my 5 sisters, and me. And the luggage rack was piled high with a rainbow of suitcases. We toured all over Western Europe. We saw all the sights you expect to see, the cathedrals, museums. Of course, it left an indelible mark on my memory and my emotions, as it would anyone. And I've often regretted that I was only 14 that summer, because the priorities of a teenage girl are something different than, say, it would be today if we're out to make the same trip. I remember asking Daddy to try to get tickets to see the Beatles, because they were doing a concert in Rome the same time we were there. I didn't have any luck there. That would have been something to write home about. So we toured Europe for 12 weeks, and our last stay was in Paris. And we were all making our final repacking our bags in preparation to go leave for the airport. And Daddy thought it would be a really good idea if we took everything that we had purchased during those 12 weeks, put them all in Karen's suitcase, because Karen was only 7 years old and her suitcase was still half empty. So that's what we did. Everything we bought, all the souvenirs, the clothes, everything that we had, all went into Karen's suitcase. And it made all the other bags a little lighter and a little less congested. And so we get to the airport, and customs officials picked the red suitcase to look at. They took one look at the booty in Karen's suitcase, and they looked and saw those 7 other suitcases. And it seemed pretty clear what was about to happen. But it was our lucky day. The American Express agent showed up in the nick of time and waved a magic wand or something, and we got through customs. And in a few hours, we were back home in Texas. I kept a journal that summer, which I still have. 1965, I was 14. So there's a chance you might hear something else about that trip at some point in the future. I also still have that pink suitcase. It went with me in the 70s to Livingston Manor. And a couple of years later, it went with me to France for teacher training. And in the 80s, it went to MIU when I worked on staff. And then it went back to Texas. And it made a final trip to Fairfield. It wasn't until the 21st century that I upgraded my luggage. I finally got modern suitcases with wheels, and it's green. Thank you.
Please take 2 minutes to evaluate Joe's speech. Welcome back. I'd like to introduce Stephanie Chambers, who will introduce our third speaker, Jyotiraj Adhikari. Stephanie?
It's my pleasure to introduce Jyoti. He's doing his Conflict Communicator Manual again. And actually, I evaluated this speech when he did it last time. So the circle comes back again. So Jyoti is speaking from the manual and project number 5, Your Body Speaks. Jyoti is a member of the club since 2010. He served this club as an officer in various capacities. He is now treasurer of the club and served as vice president of education in the past. Jyoti is a CPA practicing in Fairfield. He is also a chartered accountant in India and Nepal. He is an MBA graduate from MUM and lives in Fairfield with his wife and daughter. Jyoti is a very religious and God-fearing person. He respects all the religions and the people who follow them. He thinks all the religions have the same philosophy: peace, prosperity, and the salvation of mankind. Just before I title the speech, I'll just mention the objectives for Your Body Speaks. It's to use stance, movement, gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact to express your message and achieve your speech's purpose. Make your body language smooth and natural. Help me welcome Jyotiraj. The title of his speech tonight is Oh My Gods.
Fellow Toastmasters, guests, and viewers at home. As a Hindu, I was always fascinated by gods, not God. And sometimes got overwhelmed by so many gods I have. I have God for rain, I have God for water, I have God for light, I have God for darkness, I have God for education, knowledge, I have God for wealth, I have God for healing, I have God for money, each and everything I have, God. When I was a little kid, I used to go in front of the goddess Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, and make a vow. If you pass me with a great flying color this exam, I'll offer you 108 laddus. Laddu is type of sweet. It worked. I passed with the flying colors. Next year again, I go in front of her and say, this year again, if you pass me, I'll offer you 216. 108 for last year and 108 this year. So next year, that worked again. The next year I went and I said the same thing. Do the math again. So this is fascinating. This is what we did. My grandfather told me we have 330 million gods in total. Can you believe that? 330 million gods. If we divide it to our population, I'll have 12 gods. If people could, they will be trading gods with each other. And this God, which God do we have? And this God, which God do we have? Somebody will be asking, we didn't have rain this season. Do you have a God for rain? Another guy will be saying, my daughter is not good in math. If you have God of education, I can give you God of rain. They could be trading. So that much of God we have. And I asked my grandfather, where do they live? All this God, 330 million gods. He said they live everywhere. In sky, on the earth, everywhere in the universe. And I asked my grandfather, what do they eat? My grandfather said, gods need not eat. Then I asked, why do they have mouth? And he said, it's to speak, it's to talk. And I asked, you don't have, but why do they have teeth? And he said, he had no answer. I was asking again a lot of questions. And he said, you'll understand one day. The day will come when you understand. We have different gods in different shapes and sizes. We have Lord Shiva, who weighs tiger's skin, had a snake on her neck, dreadlock hair, a smoke pot. We have Lord Pharaoh, who drinks liquor, eat meat, everything. I was really surprised what's going on there. But slowly when I grew up, I started realizing what that all means. What that means. We need water. We can't imagine life without water. That's why water is God. We can't imagine life without sun. That's why sun is God. We can't have life without power and knowledge. That's why knowledge is worshipped as God. Power is worshipped as God. I realized everything that provides life or support universe for its existence is God. You breathe God. You live God. You see God. You eat God. You hear God. You feel God. Your birth is God. Your life is God. Your death is God. This is the cycle which provides support to the existence of the universe. That's why your death, birth, life, everything is God. Each and every cell you have is God. Each and every animal in this ecosystem is God. Because we need them from insect to elephant. We need them. We need each and every planet to balance the system. That's why each and every planet is worshipped as God. Every power is God. Power which created the universe is worshipped as Lord Brahma. The power which keeps us alive is Lord Vishnu. And the disaster which seeds new evolution is Lord Shiva. So each and every power has given a shape so that we can acknowledge them. We can worship them. That is what the God is. So here, a God is speaking, and the gods are listening. I am the God. You are the God. That is what in the philosophy is. And that is what I mean by, oh my God. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti Raj. Let's take 2 minutes to evaluate the speaker. We're back. Mr. Timer, did all our speakers qualify?
Mr. Toastmaster, all of our speakers qualified. Jeff Shipley, Jolene, Jyoti Raj.
Thank you. Please take a minute to vote for the best speaker. Now for the evaluation section of our meeting, I'd like to introduce our general evaluator for this evening, Louis Denbaum.
Good evening, everyone. This is a very important part of our meeting when our speakers get to find out what they did well and where they can make improvements. That is our main reason in Toastmasters, is to improve our ability to speak. So I'd like to bring up Jean Simonton Craig, who will evaluate Jeff.
Fellow Toastmasters, guests, and viewers at home. Jeff is a very passionate individual, obviously feels deeply about what he's talking about. That's an important piece for persuading, in my opinion, which is the purpose of this talk. Did the speaker project sincerity and conviction? I thought it was very strong, very well pronounced. Was the speaker a credible source of information about this topic? He seemed very knowledgeable about all the details, dates, times, progression of the situation. Did the speaker phrase his or her appeal in terms of the audience's self-interest? I said yes to that, but here's where I'm going to go to the next one. Did the speech opening capture the audience's interest? Where I felt there could be a slight improvement if I were giving this again would be to perhaps engage the audience or Governor Branstad, whoever it is, on a more human kind of level and just say, think how you might feel if you were terminally ill, experiencing excruciating pain, but denied a substance that could help. And give that a moment to sink in, pause, because no one would like to be in that situation for themselves or for anyone else. And that would be a good opening to help pull the audience in more on where Jeff was going, in my opinion. Did the speaker use facts and logical reasoning to support his or her views? This is a part that I thought was very strong in Jeff. 3 arguments, moral, economic, and political, and he laid it all out. Everything was very logically I's dotted, T's crossed. I like that. Did the speaker properly use emotion to persuade the audience to support his or her views? I felt he was very involved and was projecting a lot of passion. I thought that in combination with his vocal variety, another suggestion to give would be to alternate the stridency with the heartfelt. So go with the strong, go with the louder one, emphasizing the point, but then allowing it to go back onto, really, Governor, is this what you would want for a member of your family? Something that alternates it a bit. That would be my suggestion. The speak organization, effective, yes, I thought it was very direct, very point value. It was very easy for me to follow it and understand it. What could the speaker have done differently to make the speech more effective? Well, I've mentioned that. Do some quieter to louder, quieter to louder. Sometimes when you feel really strongly about something, you want to just nail it, but that can lose texture, I think. What did I really like about the speech? I'm really liking that. I don't think I'm being timed, but that's okay. So, very strong attention to details. That's what I like. Jeff really mastered the situation and knows what's going on with this situation. Not quite fair. And secondly, his persuasive arguments were very well organized. I would feel Jeff would be a very strong advocate for this situation, and I would highly recommend that he be able to represent to the governor on this. Thank you.
Mr. Timer, you must give extra time to Jean because of improperly functioning lights.
Not malfunctioning. Timer.
I was giving you the benefit of the doubt, claiming the lights weren't working. And next, I would like to invite up Art Atkinson. Art, who will evaluate your list.
Well, Toastmasters, I think that was a great icebreaker. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. I think that this theme of luggage, tying everything together with luggage, was a clever idea. What I really enjoyed about your talk, Jolene, for one thing, you said you were nervous, and I didn't see a nervous person up here. I saw a person that had delightful humor. You chose clever things to be funny about. The hot pink, and the upgrade in the 21st century to luggage with wheels. I mean, the speech was replete with clever pieces of humor that weren't obvious, like hit it over the head. It was just delightful, clever humor. How many of us feel like we got to know Jolene pretty well from that? We got the perspective of a young girl, we had the organization, the family scene. The opening body conclusion was clear. The family scene, what's going to generate this trip, the announcement, and then all the luggage hassle, and then the trip itself and some of the details, and then the wrap-up, what's happened since, and the upgrade to luggage to tie it all back together. That was clever. I like that. The humor of talking text and y'all. Very good. What could you have done differently, Jolene, to make this speech better? Well, the first thing I would say is you need to project your voice a little more. I came up here to sit and listen just so I could make sure to actually hear you. The speech could have also been improved a little bit with, it's just vocal variety, which is a project that'll come along a couple, 3 speeches from now. That's the one thing that just was a standout for me about what could have improved this. Otherwise, it was just cleverly done. It definitely reflected adequate preparation. We got to know you. The organization was clear. I think it was a humdinger. So with that, I will return control to the general evaluation.
Thank you, Art. Anyone catch the fact that all 3 speakers' first names start with J? Isn't that cosmic? The J speakers. Okay. Next, I would like to call up Stephanie Chambers, who will evaluate Jyoti.
Hello, Toastmasters viewers at home. I'm sure we've all been very curious about the gods. And I think now Jyoti has made us aware of all of the millions of them, even the ones we didn't know about before. So I think we all learned a lot from Jyoti's speech. In terms of my evaluation, I'm supposed to focus mainly on how he used gestures. And I think we all noticed that Jyoti made lots of gestures. He was using his arms a lot. There are lots of gods and there are lots of movement, which was great. I think perhaps you could have made a little bit more effort to make the movements a little different, because I felt there was a little bit of repetition at times as to the movement. But it is tricky. I was trying to think of examples of things that maybe you could have given us different gesture for, and I was thinking maybe, the rain and the rain god or something like that. Some aspect of each of the gods maybe you could have illustrated. And I also thought maybe things to do with the ladus, where you were giving 108 ladus, which are these balls. I thought that could have been elaborated a little bit more, because I kept thinking, well, is he buying the ladus? Or is he making each ladu? I don't know, I was just curious about that, because in terms of, obviously, it's an offering, so you have to make some effort, and I presume you'd have to make the effort in terms of money or effort in making them. But maybe you could have made more with that gestures. But overall, I thought you did a great job, and I really loved your speech, and I felt there was a lot of humor, and it was very heartfelt, and I could see you as a little boy quizzing your parent with these endless questions, which I think we all can remember being like that as a child, you know. And the grandfather eventually having to say that he would have to wait for the answer for that. So I thought that was really great. Maybe you could have made a little bit more use in terms of structure or stage or something. Maybe when you were a child you could have been on one side or something like that, or maybe you could have shown us that you were a little boy asking these questions or something to do more with your body to show the gestures. But overall, I thought it was a great speech, and I loved every minute of it. I felt I learned a lot about the gods and how Hinduism explains them, and how you took that to a deeper level at the end of the message, which I thought was really profound, to say that, you know, everything is God, and that's a great message. So I really loved your speech, and I look forward to hearing more.
Now it is time for reports from our role players. And we'll start with our vote. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So now it is time to vote for Best Evaluator, Mr. Timer, with the adjustment for Jean. Does everyone qualify?
Everyone qualified.
Okay, please read the names.
Jean, Art, and Stephanie.
And
Will Mr. Wilbur.
Okay, don't forget Mr. Will Burns. Okay, and we're back. So now it is time for the report from our role players. And we will start with Monty, our timer.
Thank you, Lewis. So going back to the beginning of our meeting, table topics, Art spoke first. Art spoke for 2 minutes and 9 seconds. Table topic contestant. Gilberto spoke for 1 minute 41 seconds. Rhonda spoke for 1 minute 34. Rick was clocked in at 1:33, and Jean rounded it out at 2:16. All within the times. Speeches, Mr. Shipley came in at 7:25. Jolynn, the very first speech, and your timer has another neat culprit right here. Is that icebreakers are actually usually 4 to 6 minutes. I had announced that it was 5 to 7. But either way, Jolynn was right at the 5-minute mark. Her speech came in at 5:05. Very well done. Jyoti, you came in at 6:11. Will, as an evaluator for table topics, you clocked in at 2:55. Jean, miraculously, 3 minutes 00, right on the dot. And Art, you were 2:34. And Stephanie rounded it out with 2 minutes and 49 seconds.
Thank you, Monty. Now it's time for our grammarian report from Dan Craig.
First, the word of the day, replete. I heard Art use it, Gilberto use it, and Will. Were there any others? Correct. I heard a lot of very interesting language, nice phrases, interesting use of words. Art, in his table topic story, said his stomach muscles felt like I'd been doing sit-ups for hours. Rhonda, I didn't get a quote, but I thought it was a very nice picture when she talked about standing on the bridge over the brook with a flashlight looking down at the big fish that were hiding among the rocks. Rick used the phrase incendiary food, which was very catchy. Jeff, I think I had a correction, but I'm not sure. You said he was never a healthful person. I would have said healthy, but I may be subject to correction myself. One thing you did say that I thought was very striking was, I don't want to live in an Iowa that ignores the suffering of individuals. A very strong statement. Jolynn in her talk said, her trip left an indelible mark on my emotions, my psyche. Jyoti Raj, I thought you had a few points where you dropped your articles before the noun. When you began your speech, you were talking about there being a God for everything. I have a God for rain, and so, but you weren't saying the article A, before God. You had a couple of very powerful phrases, though. You, at one point, had a whole list of different ways that God's expressed. You said, you breathe God, you see God, you hear God, you eat God. That was very striking. And at the end you said, a God is speaking and a God is listening. Very nice. Thank you.
And now it's time for Rhonda Whitaker's counter report.
Thank you. My Arcana report was replete with so's and ands. Art had one so, one and. Ria had one so. Gilberto had one two ums, 5 so's, 1 but, and 1 and. Rick was clean. Jean had 1 so. Will had 1 so, 2 buts, 1 and. Jeff had 9 so's. Jolynn had 2 ahs, 4 so's, 2 buts, and 9 ands. Stephanie had 1 ah, 4 so's, 2 buts, 3 ands, and 1 how false start. Jyoti had 1 and. He didn't quite pronounce the TH on death and birth. That was something I wanted to note because I know Jyoti's improving pronunciation. And he had 1 false start or repeat. It says, why do they, such and such. I would suggest that all of us look up synonyms for and. Jeff gave a very logical speech tonight, logical progression in his speech. And he would say so from one point to another. Sometimes you could say therefore, Governor Branstad, or I say to you, Governor Branstad, something like that. If we had some synonyms or something that could stand in for the word so when it's really an important transition point, I think that would help all of us with to reduce our number of so's between sentences as fillers. And the thing I would say about and is that sometimes people say and when they really could be taking a breath, because it's just a filler. We could fill ourselves with breath. That is my report.
Thank you. Now the moment I've been waiting for, the joke from Jeff Shipley.
I have not prepared a joke. I'll yield to anyone who has a joke, or I will yield the time back to the meeting.
I have one that happened just this week.
Come on up.
Thanks, Annette.
Come on up. I want to keep the meeting on time.
It's actually, these are things that happened a long time ago, but they came up this week. I have to ask you, how many of you are not Siddhas? Is there anyone who's not? One? Okay, good. But you know about yogic flying, you've heard.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got 2 Siddha stories. Remember I told you that yes.
Say, I don't know about
Jean.
Yeah, try to keep it to 1. We only have a 1-minute joke.
Okay. Not sure I can do that, so I should stop and do it next week or next time.
It's always 1 minute.
It's always 1 minute.
Say what?
Well, I can tell 1 this week and then 1 next week.
Yeah.
I've already used up my time, so.
You got us laughing.
Well, I'll talk about sex.
Yeah, that's funny, that's funny.
Jumping in. That's what I like about the club spirit here. When there are roles that need to be filled, you spontaneously fill them. Wonderful. All right, now it is time for me as the general evaluator to talk about our meeting, how it went. The setup went well. However, we are missing some items due to our Sergeant of Arms not being present. And so it's a little bit of a drawback when we're missing ballots and general evaluator forms and guest ribbons. All of the roles were filled, even though some people had to double up and time to do 2 roles. We started on time. The president opened the meeting brilliantly. That's a joke. The role players described their roles very well. The table topics questions were great and challenging. And I actually loved Rhonda's challenge to us about the word "and," something that you don't really see in an account. So some knowledge about the word "and" a direction for us to improve. I love that. And now for the evaluators. So Will Burns, our table topics evaluator. It's always a rough job because you have so little time and so many people to evaluate. He did great. He had a comment for everybody, the global comment that everybody greeted the audience. I like that. And he had suggestions for everyone. He had humor in genes, and we're not quite sure whether he intended or not, but good job. It was funny, a funny pun. He gave suggestions about using the 30 seconds, and he actually didn't just throw it in because it's an easy thing to throw in, take the 30 seconds. He actually gave an example of what could have been organized in a couple of the speeches during that 30 seconds. So I thought that was a really good use of your suggestions in that. Next we had Jean. And I'm going to comment about the introduction because I believe, as I said last week or the week before, it's part of being an evaluator. So Jean read his objectives and gave us a way to actually listen to the talk. Imagine that you're Governor Branstad. So she added that. That was her contribution as the evaluator. She came out in front. She used the manual, which is always a good thing. You can't go wrong using the manual. She gave a really good suggestion about how to bring the audience in. And again, she actually even gave you, Jeff, the words that you could have used, which is a great way to make a suggestion. It's like, show the person. Really, really good. And she gave you some good advice about appealing to the heart, appealing to the mind, loud, soft. So she gave you some good pointers. And I like the fact that she started the evaluation by talking about how passionate you were, and that actually helped the purpose of your speech. So good job, Jean. Art, you did an excellent introduction, and it really seemed to me that you prepared it. You put some attention on it, which I really like. And by the way, hopefully you speakers are sending your evaluators your introduction so they can do their job. You came out in front. You gave good examples of what you liked. You asked a question of us, so you brought us in as the audience. And you stuck to our icebreaker light policy of evaluation. We're not going to really go into all the things that someone in their first speech will eventually end up including when they get to their 10th speech. So I like the fact that you kept it icebreaker light, I'll call it. But you gave her a few suggestions about projecting her voice and vocal variety. And finally, Stephanie, again, a good introduction. And you gave his objectives, which is always helpful. Came out in front. You gave some suggestions about his gestures. It wasn't just use more gestures or verb. You gave us the rain. You gave us the 108 ladus. So it's always powerful when you can tell people how to do their suggestions. And you also gave them a staging idea, like get down a little, like when your boy asked your grandmother. So good suggestions. Overall, I thought our evaluators did an excellent job. And now I will turn it back over to our Toastmaster, Rick Starr.
I'd like to present the meeting awards. Starting out with the best evaluator, drum roll, Pete Simington-Craig. Our best table topic speaker, Rick Starr.
Yay!
Thank you. Heck of a job. And now, our best speaker, Jeff Shipley. Invite Joe Lynn to come up and get a ribbon for your icebreaker. Congratulations. And Raj. I'd like to turn the meeting back over to our president, Louis Denbaum.
Thank you, Rick. Our Sergeant at Arms, our Toastmaster, our Table Topics winner. You're the man of the evening. So first of all, now I'm going to call on Jean Simington-Craig, our Vice President of Membership, for an induction.
Thank you. That could be an applause, actually. Ms. Dolan Gates, would you? Sure, whatever you like. And I want everyone to notice, newest member knows how to walk around. I think that's a Membership in Toastmasters is a privilege, and the only way to gain the benefits of our program is to actively participate. Do you, Jolynn Gates, promise, and now I'm going to read the Toastmasters promise, which is actually good for all of us to review. Do you promise to attend club meetings regularly? You can say, I do.
I do.
To prepare all of my speech and leadership projects to the best of my ability, your ability, I'll just say your. Basing them on projects of the Competent Communicator, Advanced Communicator, or Competent Leadership Manuals.
I do.
To prepare for and fulfill meeting assignments. To provide fellow members with helpful, constructive evaluations.
I do.
To help the club maintain the positive, friendly environment necessary for all members to learn and grow.
I do.
To serve your club as an officer when called upon to do so.
I do.
To treat your fellow club members and our guests with respect and courtesy.
I do.
To bring guests to club meetings so they can see the benefits Toastmasters membership offers.
I do.
To adhere to the guidelines and rules for all Toastmasters educational and recognition programs.
I do.
And finally, to maintain honest and highly ethical standards during the conduct of all Toastmaster activities.
I do.
Good. Club, fellow Golden Speakers. Do you, the members of Golden Speakers Toastmasters Club, promise to support, and I think let's get on our feet for this, we usually do. Do you promise to support Jo Lynn as she works the Toastmasters program?
Yes!
It is my pleasure to declare you installed as a member of Golden Speakers Toastmasters Club. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Madam Vice President of Membership. Art Atkinson.
Yeah, based on Jyoti Raj's speech, I think that we can probably revise our member induction ceremony to include the statement, do you promise to treat all your fellow Toastmasters as the gods that they are?
All right. Excellent. We'll take that up in another meeting for a vote. Who remembers what PPP stands for? My new part of Toastmasters.
President's pet peeve.
Yes, that's right. So I'm going to be real quick about this one because we're running a little bit over schedule. Many years ago, when I first joined Toastmasters, I didn't know what the Sergeant of Arms did. I was just told, we come early and we set up the room. We stay late and we pack up the room. I didn't know that theoretically that was the job of the Sergeant of Arms. Okay. Now our Sergeant of Arms is recuperating from a 30-foot fall. So I want to bring you back to that time. We're all responsible for getting this room set up. So what I was told is you either help set up or you help break down. Do one. You can't get away with just kind of waltzing in at the last minute and rushing out at the end. So please, if you can, help with one or both of those. It'll make our meetings a lot better and it won't be the burden on one or two people. That's my pet peeve for the evening. Woo. Is there any further club business?